Okay, guys. So I just wanted to. Okay. Okay, guys. I just wanted to make this video. I felt led to make this video today, and I just wanted to talk about God's will for your life. I know in Christianity it tends to be kind of a taboo thing that no, you should want God's will for your life. Ask God what His will for your life is, and He'll show you the way, and all this kind of stuff. And to an extent, that's true, but you have to be incredibly careful with where you put your focus. One of the things that I've seen as a Christian many, many times again is that so many people will put their focus on something that they are convinced is their will. And of course, they have the whole thing. Well, how do you know it's God's will? Well, He'll send you signs, He'll open doors and all this kind of stuff. And you go down that path without realizing that you made those doors open. You made that path, and that may not actually be what God's will for your life is, but because you're so focused on it, and you're so focused on essentially trying to make that your path, you unintentionally create this idea that it's God's path for your life, only to follow through with it, and at the end of it, to look back and say, this isn't God's path for my life, and now I'm in the same free fall of I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So I'm going to see if I can share two stories with you really quick. So the first was a pastor who used to work at a church. Well, pastor used to work at a church. He was a pastor of a church, and he decided one day that he was going to quit his pastoral position at the church to go follow a nonprofit, little nonprofit corporation to, perform certain functions and all this kind of stuff. And he'd be helping ministries in this way and in this way. And it was going to be a little bit better of a financial situation for him. And he was going to be in a different city, closer to family, la-da-da-da-da, right? And so he was praying about it. God, is this your will? God, is this your will? I don't want to do anything if it's not your will for my life, and all this kind of stuff. And he was convinced very strongly that that is indeed the direction that God wanted him to go. And so he announced to the church that, hey, I'm going to be moving. So I'm going to be trying to find you another pastor, but I'm going to be moving to another position. I really love you guys, this and this and that. But it was interesting to see because him and I were good friends. We were good pals. I didn't stop in every Sunday because he was about an hour and a half away from me, because I kind of lived like way out in the boonies at the time. So I remember one time, I used to be a salesman. And one time I asked him, I was like, well, how do you know that this is God's position? Because I was kind of in the same place where I was also looking for God's will for my life. And I was like, well, what are the signs? How do you know the feeling and all this kind of stuff? And he explained the entire process of how everything came about. And to me as a salesman, it was just instinctual. I was like, oh, you just got sold on that position. And that's kind of what I blurted out without thinking. I just kind of think like, oh, you just got sold. Like that was it. It's not necessarily God's position for your life. You just got sold. And, he stopped and he was like, wait, what? What just, how is this? And I told him, I was like, yeah. And, as a salesperson, you learn to give space between moments, but whenever you get a no, you don't just stop right there. You go for 7 no's, because at about the 5th or 6th attempt, eventually a person will say yes if they really, really want it. If you get your 7 no's, then don't waste any more of your time. And sure enough, his whole feeling was that this guy had asked about 5 times, and he was feeling really drawn at the fact that he was so persistent, and he felt like maybe God was leading him in this direction. He prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and he just felt the more he prayed about it, the more at peace he felt with it, the more calm he felt with it, the more grounded he felt with it. And so he decided, you know what, let's go ahead and do this. Well, after I had blurted out, oh, you just got sold on it, which I didn't necessarily mean to, accidentally, I noticed that after, I stopped going to his church because I found one closer to me, and then I came back a few months later. I noticed he was still there at that church, and I was like, wait, I thought you were leaving that church. And so I I couldn't get in touch with him, and so I just spoke to my sister, because my sister has a good connection with him. And what she told me was that I was the realization for him that he was just being sold on a position, and that it wasn't necessarily God's will for his life, but he just got sold by a good salesman's trick, and he felt like his energy was best spent still there pastoring that church. And I was shocked by that, because he told me he felt so strongly about it. The second story is, so he still pastors that church today. The second story is a story of a woman and her husband. Her husband got prostate cancer, and they were extremely focused on not doing a vasectomy, which would have hindered his ability to have kids. And the man felt that it was God's will that he kept his ability to procreate. And so he didn't want a vasectomy, or was it a vasectomy? No, removal of the prostate. I don't know why I'm saying vasectomy. It was removing his prostate, I think is what it was. But essentially, whatever surgery it was going to keep him from being able to have kids. And so, so he was like, no, I feel we've been praying, and we've decided that God is going to heal me through natural means, and we're not going to go through the medical route of doing things. So that's where their focus went, and they started to pray. God opened doors, and they found this doctor in Mexico who had a natural way of healing people with cancers, and thousands of people had gone to this man's clinic because they didn't want to go through chemotherapy, or they didn't want to go through these difficult surgeries and stuff. And he had treated thousands of people and all this kind of stuff. And so they felt really, really drawn that this was their path. The problem was that it was going to cost $60,000. They didn't have $60,000 at the time. And so they decided, you know what, God's going to provide a way. If this is what's for us, then God's going to provide a way. So they started these online campaigns, these GoFundMes, and all this kind of stuff, just kind of taking small little bits of action here and there, and just reaching out to the Christian community and saying, hey, this is our situation. This is what we feel God wants for us. And what ends up happening is they end up raising the money from a lot of Christians pulling their money together. They go to Mexico, they undergo about 2 months or 3 months of treatment, and they're posting about it and all this kind of stuff. This is what God's doing for us. Everything is great. And little did they know that the treatment that they were doing actually wasn't helping them at all. And he was getting worse and worse and worse. And because he was waiting so long, the cancer ended up getting extremely malignant and going out throughout his entire body. So after all of the stress, then they started saying, okay, well, we thought that this was God's will for our life, because that's where we were putting our focus. That's where we were putting our attention, and God was opening doors. We needed $60,000. We've never had that much money before. And all of a sudden now we have $60,000 because the Christians pulled all their money together, and we can get this treatment. And we thought everything was going great. And now he's stage 4 cancer, and it's gone throughout his entire body. And after all of that, they decided that now it was God's will that they have all the appropriate surgeries. So he had his prostate removed. He underwent chemotherapy, and, it's a sad ending. He ends up dying, and a lot of effort. He ended up leaving a wife and 6 kids on their own, and the wife unfortunately didn't have any skills, so she had to go work at a fast food restaurant to try to make up money to pay for all the kids, because half of them were still in school and all that. And it's just a tough situation. But I remember watching them through that, because they were so active on Facebook, and just watching them see, this is God's will for my life. This is God's will for my life. Where he's opening our doors, and this and this and that. And, just simple time after time after time after time that I see stories like this come up. And it's one of those things where you can be in one of two situations. You can say, oh, well, simply God just doesn't have a will for you in your life, period, and it's just what you decide what you want to do for God. And although I think that idea has some merit, I don't think that's very accurate. I think that we all have a divine purpose here. I think that God all has what we should be doing versus what we are doing. And I think that has a tendency of getting muddled in Christianity, and people get so overly focused on those things. And I don't want to extend the video any longer, but I do want to talk on this later. But yeah, I might have to make a part 2 to this because YouTube doesn't let me upload longer than 11 minutes on a video. So I'll stop this video and I guess I'll just make a part 2.